I had always thought family was supposed to be a safe place. A place where love flowed like a steady stream, where you'd be cared for in your golden years. But now, at 77, I realized that the truth was far more bitter. The truth was that family could also be a place where you're discarded when you're no longer useful, a place where the people who once promised to take care of you are the very ones who will take everything you have. It all started the day after the funeral. The day after I laid my beloved husband to rest. Harold had been my rock for 55 years. He was my partner, my love, my best friend. I had loved him with a devotion that never wavered, even when the years grew long and the wrinkles formed. The house was quieter now, emptier, without his voice calling from the kitchen or his heavy boots scraping the floorboards as he came in after a long day of work. I didn't expect to be alone, not after everything. Harold always promised me that we would be taken care of in our old age. We had worked together to build something lasting. And I thought that when the time came we would both enjoy it. But with him gone, it all seemed so fragile. I could feel the weight of his absence pressing down on me, as if the house itself mourned with me. But it wasn't just the house that had changed. It was them. My son, Kevin, and his wife, Brenda. For years, Kevin had been the apple of my eye, my only child. I had watched him grow from a curious little boy into a man who, I thought, would carry on the legacy of our family's hard work. I supported him through thick and thin. Every birthday, every holiday I was there, offering him the love and care that any mother would. He had never gone without, and neither had his family. But now, the same hands that I had raised and guided were reaching out to take from me. Kevin was different. His eyes no longer held the warmth I remembered, and his touch had turned cold. I began to notice how Brenda always had that certain look in her eyes, the one that spoke of calculating decisions rather than genuine concern. Still, I thought I was being paranoid. After all, they were family. They couldn't be planning anything against me, could they? It wasn't until they came to visit that I realized something was wrong. They walked in just as they always did, but today there was something in their demeanor, something in the way they spoke. Kevin was too calm, too rehearsed. Brenda's smile was too wide, too false. The air felt thick with a tension I couldn't explain. "Mom," Kevin began, his voice unusually gentle. "We've been talking about how things are going." I had just finished making a small lunch for myself. It was nothing special, just a bowl of soup and some bread. But I put it down and looked at them, waiting for him to continue. "We've been thinking," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "that maybe it's time for a change. You know, for your own good." I tilted my head. What was he talking about? "Kevin, I'm fine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm managing just fine, thank you." He exchanged a glance with Brenda, then looked back at me. "You may think so, Mom," he said, "but we've noticed that you've been struggling. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We're just concerned." "I'm fine," I repeated, my voice firmer this time, though my heart was beginning to pound. I could feel it. Something was happening, something that I wasn't going to like. Kevin sighed, a sigh so heavy it felt like it carried all his burdens. "Look, Mom," he said, leaning forward. "I know you don't want to burden anyone, but this is for the best. We've already made arrangements." "Arrangements?" I asked, confusion filling my chest. "Yeah, we've found a wonderful place for you. It's a top-notch nursing home. You'll be looked after. No more worries about the stairs or getting meals. You won't have to take care of anything. You deserve to relax." Nursing home. The words hit me like a slap in the face. I blinked, but no words came out. I had been independent for so long. I had always taken care of myself. Why would they think I couldn't anymore? Why was he making these decisions for me, as if I didn't have a say? "No," I said, a chill running through my veins. "I don't need any nursing home. I don't need any help. I'm fine just the way I am." But he was insistent. "Mom, we've already signed the papers," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's all taken care of. We've just been waiting for you to understand that this is what's best." A knot formed in my stomach, and my hands began to tremble. I looked down at the documents they handed me. Papers full of legal jargon, things I didn't understand. I couldn't read it all, but I knew what it was. This was it. They were taking control. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me. This wasn't love. This wasn't concern. It was manipulation. I had always been so proud of how I had raised Kevin, how I had taught him to be kind, responsible, to value family. But now I saw what was really inside him. Greed. The same greed that Brenda had brought into our home. They had already made their plan, and it was too late to stop them. "Please, Mom," Kevin said, his voice thick with false empathy. "You don't have to worry. Just sign the papers and we'll take care of everything. You'll be so much happier." And then I did it. I signed the papers. I don't know why I did. Maybe it was the pressure, maybe it was because I didn't want to disappoint them. Or maybe it was because I had no choice but to surrender. But I felt it. The moment my pen hit the paper, I knew. They had won. I sat there, feeling like the world had slipped away from me. It wasn't just about a nursing home. It was about control, about taking everything that I had worked for, everything that was mine, and turning it into theirs. I had been a fool to think they loved me, to think they cared. This was never about my well-being. This was about power. But as I sat there in the silence, a spark of something stirred inside me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was something much more dangerous. They had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated me. And I would make them pay. I sat in the sterile room, the white walls pressing in on me like a suffocating blanket. The faint hum of fluorescent lights was the only sound, the only rhythm that marked time now. This wasn't my home. It wasn't even a place I recognized. It was a prison they had built for me, one where the bars were made of false promises, and the key was buried deep in their hands. The room was small, barely big enough to fit the bed and the few pieces of furniture they had provided me with. A dresser, chair, table. No warmth, no comfort, no life. Everything that had once made my house a home, everything that had been filled with memories of Harold and our years together, was gone. I felt the weight of it all as I stared at the empty walls, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and anger. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like a prisoner in my own life. I had endured years of hard work, sacrifice, and love for my family. I had been the one to hold it all together, to support them when they needed me most. But now, when I needed them, when I needed just a little bit of respect and dignity, they had discarded me like I was nothing. The worst part wasn't just being placed in this facility. The worst part was that they had used my grief, my vulnerability, as their weapon. It had been a well-executed plan, their carefully crafted deception. They had convinced me that they were doing this for my own good, that I needed help, that I was too old to take care of myself. They had wrapped their lies in kindness, in false concern. But now I saw it for what it was. Theft. Betrayal. As I sat at the small table, the one with the cheap veneer and worn edges, my fingers traced the stack of papers that had been left on the surface. Documents, receipts, transactions. It was all here. The money. My money. And I could feel the blood in my veins grow cold as I realized what they had been doing behind my back. I had trusted them. I had trusted my son, Kevin, and his wife, Brenda, to look after me. But now, as I carefully examined the figures, I saw it. Small purchases here and there, transactions that had nothing to do with my well-being. A new TV for their house. A vacation to some beach I hadn't even been told about. Shopping sprees that had nothing to do with my care. I could see the numbers. I could see the pattern. They were draining me, piece by piece, like a slow, steady leak. The thought made my chest tighten. I had been too trusting, too naive. But not anymore. I wasn't going to sit here and let them do this to me. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting as I moved, but I didn't care. I was ready. Ready for the fight I hadn't chosen but had been thrust into. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From rage. Cold, calculated rage. I reached for my phone, my hand steady now as I scrolled through the messages. They had been contacting me less and less. The calls were always brief, always rushed. Kevin had become distant, too busy with his new life to even check on me. And Brenda. She had never even bothered to pretend to care. But now, as I looked at the last message from Kevin, I felt the spark of determination ignite in me. "We've taken care of everything, Mom. Don't worry, we've got it covered. See you soon." I stared at the message, then scrolled to the next one. A receipt from the same day. A receipt for a new set of golf clubs. Kevin's favorite hobby. And the price. Small fortune. My fortune. I clenched my fists. This was it. I had to act. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was going to take back control. Over the next few days, I started recording everything. Every transaction. Every dollar spent. I made notes, I kept track. I watched as they drained my accounts, each penny spent on things that didn't concern me. And I realized something they didn't know. I had inherited more from Harold than just his love. I had inherited his knowledge. The knowledge of how to manage money, how to build wealth, how to protect what was mine. I had learned from the best, and now it was time to use that knowledge against them. I began to take action quietly. I stopped spending, and instead, I redirected what little money I had left into a separate account, one they couldn't touch. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I was preparing for the long game, for the moment when I could finally strike back. It wasn't going to be quick. It wasn't going to be loud. But it was going to be effective. I didn't care that Kevin and Brenda thought they had me cornered. I had been underestimated before. But they would regret it. I would make them regret every decision, every lie, every time they thought they could take from me. I wasn't just an old woman who had outlived her usefulness. I was Esther, and I had a plan. And I was going to make sure they paid for what they had done to me. I sat at the small round table in the corner of my room, my fingers idly tracing the rim of my teacup. Outside, the world was turning. People were busy. Life was moving forward. But in this room, in this space, I had become something different, something that neither Kevin nor Brenda could fully comprehend. I wasn't just a vulnerable old woman anymore. I was watching, waiting, calculating. Every detail mattered now. Every movement they made was a potential mistake, a crack in their carefully constructed plan. And Kevin, he thought he had won. He thought he had me under his thumb. But there was something he didn't account for. Something he couldn't possibly have understood. I had always been quiet, always kept to myself. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't naive. And now, as I sat there watching his every move, I could see the cracks in his facade. The first sign came when I noticed the new car parked outside. Sleek black sports car, expensive, no doubt. I wasn't fooled. Kevin was spending my money on things that didn't concern me. It was as if he was flaunting it in front of me, a final nail in the coffin of my independence. The car wasn't even the worst part. It was the Instagram posts that followed. Pictures of him and Brenda, grinning, holding drinks by the beach with the caption, "Living the dream." #blessed, #family first. The word stung. Family first. I wasn't even included in his picture-perfect world. I was no longer a part of their lives except as a convenient source of income. The resentment started to bubble up inside me, but I didn't let it show. No, I had learned from Harold, from years of watching and listening. I would bide my time, waiting for the right moment. Began to make notes. I tracked everything. Every dollar spent, every lavish vacation, every new piece of jewelry Brenda posted about, every time Kevin flaunted his new toys. They didn't realize it, but I was building a picture, a puzzle that would soon be complete. And each piece showed a clearer and clearer image of the game they were playing. The next time Kevin came to visit, I noticed a change in him. He was still wearing his usual confident smile, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, a touch of nervousness. He sat down across from me, and for the first time in a long while, I could see him as he truly was. Not the confident, self-assured man he wanted to be, but a man who was beginning to realize that things weren't going as smoothly as he thought. "How are you settling in, Mom?" he asked, but I could see the hesitation in his voice. "I'm fine, Kevin. I'm managing," I replied, keeping my voice even, though inside I felt the slow simmer of anger building. I had expected him to be confident, maybe even a little smug, but instead he looked uncomfortable. He fidgeted with his watch, glancing around the room as if the walls themselves might betray him. It was subtle, but I could see it. His bravado was starting to crack. I didn't say anything. I just sat there watching him, letting the silence hang between us. "Everything's going well at home," he continued, his voice a little too high-pitched. "Brenda's doing great, and, we're thinking about taking a little trip to the Bahamas next month. A much-needed vacation, you know." I could barely contain my contempt. He was spending my money, on a lavish vacation while I sat here, in this sterile room, forgotten and abandoned. "Bahamas, huh?" said my voice low. "Sounds nice." "Yeah, it should be great," he said, clearly eager to talk about something that would distract me. "I'll get you a little gift when we're there, Mom. You know, just something nice." I didn't reply, just kept looking at him. The silence between us grew thick, but he seemed to grow more uncomfortable with each passing second. And then it hit me, he was scared. He was scared of me seeing through his act. He was scared because he knew deep down that I was starting to piece things together. He wasn't the smart businessman he thought he was. He had made mistakes. He had spent too much too quickly, without realizing that he was drawing attention to his greed. And now he was nervous. But he still didn't understand what I had learned. He thought he could control me, but he didn't know that I was gathering information, that I was watching him, that I was learning from his every move. "I'm sure Brenda would love it," I said, my tone cool. "I hope you enjoy your trip." The flicker of uncertainty passed across his face, and I could see him struggle to maintain his composure. His smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Yeah, well, it's all about making the most of life, right?" he said, trying to regain some of his old confidence. "Of course," I replied, the words thick with irony. The rest of the visit passed in a tense silence. Kevin left soon after, but I didn't miss the way he glanced over his shoulder as he walked out. It was a small, subtle shift, but it was enough. He knew that I knew. And that thought brought a quiet satisfaction to my heart. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was ready. I could see the cracks in his armor. And now, all I had to do was wait for him to make one more mistake. I sat back in my chair, my mind already planning the next steps. Kevin thought he was winning. But what he didn't realize was that his victory was built on shaky ground. And that ground was about to collapse beneath him. The old computer in front of me hummed softly, its screen a flickering window to the world I had left behind. I had learned a long time ago to rely on the tools available to me. And now, sitting here in the sterile confines of the nursing home, I was using everything at my disposal. They thought I was helpless, that I was too old, too broken, too weak. But they underestimated me. They didn't know that, while they had been stealing from me, I had been quietly building a plan. Every morning, as the staff bustled around, I would sit by the small desk in my room, opening the old computer. It wasn't much, just a basic model, clunky and outdated, but it was my portal to everything I needed. Slowly, methodically, I began to track every transaction, every expenditure. I had learned Harold's ways. He had taught me all those years ago how to handle money, how to see the details that others overlooked. And now, every dollar Kevin and Brenda spent was a piece of the puzzle. I didn't trust the staff here, not completely. But Maria, the young nurse who took care of me, had become a quiet ally. She wasn't like the others. While the others ignored me, treated me like just another patient, Maria saw me. She saw my sharpness, my quiet intelligence. She knew what was happening. And though she couldn't speak out loud, I could feel her subtle support. She'd leave little clues. An extra few minutes with the computer when the room was empty. A whispered word here and there when she knew no one was listening. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was all I needed. Every evening I'd look at the latest photos that Kevin and Brenda had posted. They thought they were being clever, showing off their expensive vacations and new possessions. But with each photo, each caption, they were making a mistake. They were leaving a trail, one that would eventually lead to their downfall. Each new picture was another piece of evidence that I could use against them. New car. Shopping spree. A luxury resort. The receipts were all in the bank records, and now I had the proof to show everyone just how much they had been taking from me. I began compiling everything. Each social media post, each transaction, each subtle hint of their indulgence, became a line in the ledger I was keeping. I was no longer the victim. I wasn't just sitting in this cold room waiting for them to come and visit, hoping they might remember me. No. I was working. I was making sure they wouldn't get away with it. I could feel the quiet satisfaction as I watched them, as I read the comments on their posts. The smiles, the perfect vacations, the extravagant purchases. They didn't know that each one of those was a mistake. Every time they boasted about how well things were going for them, they were only sealing their fate. I knew their secrets, their weaknesses. They didn't realize that I was already one step ahead. And then it came, the moment I had been waiting for. Kevin showed up at my room as he always did, with that too smooth smile plastered across his face. Brenda was with him, her eyes gleaming with that familiar coldness. They walked in, pretending to care, pretending everything was normal. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Kevin asked, his voice too casual. "I'm managing," I said, my voice calm, steady. "But I've been thinking about something." Kevin's eyes narrowed slightly, just the faintest flicker of uncertainty. But he hid it well, forcing his smile back into place. "Of course, anything you need, just let us know," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Brenda stood just behind him, her arms crossed, but there was something in her stance that told me she was watching me closely, waiting for my next move. "I've been thinking about some of your purchases," I said, my tone casual. "Some of the things I've seen online. Quite the expensive tastes you two have." Kevin's smile faltered, and I could see it now, the small crack in his confidence. He hadn't expected me to be so calm, so measured. But I wasn't done yet. "Funny thing," I continued, leaning forward slightly. "I've been keeping track. I've seen every new car, every vacation, every little splurge. And I wonder, Kevin, how do you plan to explain all that?" Brenda's face went pale, her eyes darting to Kevin. His confident mask was slipping. I don't know what you mean, Mom," Kevin stammered, his voice suddenly unsure. "Those are just things we've been working for." I raised an eyebrow. "You've been working for them. You've been taking my money for them, Kevin. And I've got all the proof I need." I didn't have to say more. The fear in his eyes said it all. He knew. He knew that I had seen everything, that I had been collecting the pieces of their lies. He had thought I was weak, but now he realized I was playing the game too. "I'm sure you've been working for them," I said, my voice low. "But there's one thing you forgot. Someone has to pay the bills. Someone has to sign the checks. And I'm the one who's been footing the bill." Kevin stepped back, his hands clenched into fists. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His arrogance, his confidence was gone. He was unraveling before my eyes. Brenda, meanwhile, looked like she was about to implode. She had always been the quieter one, the one who hid behind Kevin, but now I could see the panic on her face. She had thought they were invincible, untouchable. They had no idea that I had been taking notes, that I had been watching every move, every slip-up. "Kevin," I said, my voice ice-cold, "you and Brenda have made a big mistake. But don't worry. I won't let it go. I'm not helpless. And I'll make sure you pay for what you've done." I could see the change in him then. The realization hit him hard. He was no longer in control. His past confidence had been shattered, and now it was my turn to take control. "I've been gathering everything," I continued, my tone even. "Every receipt, every photo, every conversation you've had online. You thought you could keep me in the dark, but now I'm the one holding all the cards." They were cornered, and they didn't even know it yet. I sat in the small office of Miss Reed, the lawyer who had become my ally in this long game. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of everything I had gathered pressing down on me like a mountain. Every document, every receipt, every photo. It was all laid out in front of her, neatly organized, ready to show the world the truth they had tried so desperately to hide. Miss Reed looked over the evidence I had collected with a careful, practiced eye. She didn't say much at first. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. She was impressed, no more than impressed. She was almost in awe. She understood now what I had been doing all this time. She understood that my patience had been my weapon. That my quiet, calculating nature had been the key to this moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, yet filled with a quiet respect. "Mrs. Esther, you've done everything right. You've built a case so strong, I'd say it's practically airtight." She looked up from the papers, meeting my gaze. "They won't be able to deny it." I felt a quiet surge of pride, but I didn't show it. No, this wasn't the time for pride. This was the time for action. The time to finally take control of what was mine. I had waited long enough. And now it was their turn to feel the consequences of their betrayal. "Are you ready to move forward?" Miss Reed asked, as if reading my thoughts. I nodded without hesitation. "Yes." She smiled slightly, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We'll file the lawsuit for elder exploitation, financial fraud, and breach of trust. And we'll make sure that they can't escape the consequences of their actions." I watched as she began to make the necessary calls, preparing everything for the next step. But even as she spoke to the authorities, I knew one thing. I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing this for every other elderly person who had been taken advantage of. For every person who had been silenced by their family, their friends, their own children. I was fighting not just for my money but for my dignity. For the right to be treated with respect, no matter my age. The day came when I finally took everything to court. Kevin and Brenda had no idea what was coming. They were still convinced they had control, still blinded by their greed. But when the courtroom doors opened and Miss Reed and I walked in, they knew. They knew that everything was about to change. Kevin's face went pale as soon as he saw me. His arrogance, so visible before, had all but evaporated. His eyes darted nervously, and his posture stiffened. Brenda, always the silent accomplice, looked just as uneasy. She had spent too long hiding behind Kevin, too long pretending to be the caring daughter-in-law, and now she was starting to see the reality of the mess they had created. The judge called the court to order, and I sat there, my heart calm, my mind sharp. I watched as the evidence was laid out before them. Transaction after transaction, photo after photo. It was all there. The vacations, the new cars, the expensive clothes. All bought with money that had once belonged to me. They couldn't deny it. They couldn't hide from it anymore. "Mr. Kevin, Mrs. Brenda," the judge said, his voice firm, "it seems that you've been using your mother's resources for personal gain. The evidence before this court speaks volumes." Kevin opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands trembling. "You knew she was vulnerable," the judge continued. "You took advantage of her trust. This is not just financial fraud. This is a breach of the most sacred trust there is, family." Kevin looked at me for the first time in what felt like forever. There was no smugness, no confidence left in his eyes. All he saw now was the woman he had tried to bury, the woman he thought would die quietly in a nursing home, forgotten and alone. But I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't alone. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I trusted them. I trusted my son and his wife with everything I had. And they took it. But now I am taking back what's mine." The courtroom went silent. Even Kevin and Brenda couldn't muster a response. The judge's gavel came down, and the verdict was clear. The case had been won. They were found guilty of exploiting an elderly person and engaging in financial fraud. The restitution would be made, and the legal consequences would follow. But as the gavel echoed in the room, something else filled the silence. It wasn't just the sound of justice being served. It was the sound of my victory. The sound of my dignity being restored. I had done it. I had fought back and I had won. I had turned their game against them, and now they were the ones left with nothing. I stood in front of the judge, watching Kevin, my son, who could no longer even look me in the eye. The weight of everything I had worked for, everything I had rebuilt after they tried to strip me of it, hung heavy in the air. For the first time in a long while I felt something close to peace. It wasn't just about the victory in the courtroom. It was about the victory over them, over the people who thought they could control my life, over the ones who underestimated me. Miss Reed, my lawyer, stood beside me, as strong and resolute as she had been throughout this battle. She had been my ally, my pillar of support when the rest of the world seemed determined to turn away from me. She had helped me take back what was mine piece by piece. Now she was watching as the judge delivered the final verdict, and it was as sweet as it was just. The court case had been swift, and the evidence Miss Reed and I presented had been overwhelming. Kevin and Brenda had no chance. They were caught in a web of lies they had spun so tightly that they couldn't escape. They thought they could exploit me, manipulate me, and take everything I had worked for. They thought I was old, weak, and powerless. But I had learned long ago that strength is not just about muscles or age. It's about heart, resilience, and knowing when to act. Now, as I stood before the judge, my mind didn't dwell on the past. No, it was focused on the future. The future that I had reclaimed. The future where my life was my own once more. Mrs. Esther, the evidence is clear, the judge said, his voice firm. The defendants, Kevin and Brenda, have misused their position of trust and committed fraud. I hereby rule in favor of the plaintiff. I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me, but it wasn't enough to make me smile. The time for smiling was over. The time for action had come. After the court ruling, everything changed. I didn't need to wait for them to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. The damage had been done. Kevin and Brenda's world, built on lies and manipulation, was in ruins. My victory wasn't just in winning the case. It was in reclaiming my life. With the legal matters sorted and my finances back in my control, I knew it was time to do more. I wasn't just going to sit back and watch. I was going to build something meaningful, something that would stand as a testament to my strength, to my resilience. I bought the old retirement home, the one I had always passed by, the one I'd once hoped would be a place for those in their golden years to live with dignity. It had always bothered me to see elderly people ignored, mistreated, or forgotten. I had seen how easily society cast aside the old, just as my own family had tried to do with me. But no longer. I was going to change that. I renovated the place, turning it into something more than just a facility for old people to live out their last years. It became a sanctuary, a place where the elderly were respected, where they could live freely and with dignity. No more hiding behind the walls, no more waiting for the end. They would live their final years with the same respect they had given to others their whole lives. And I was the one in charge. I wasn't just a woman who had been discarded by her family. I was a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ashes of betrayal, a woman who had learned to fight and win. And now, I was using my victory to give others the same chance to live with dignity that I had fought so hard to reclaim for myself. Kevin and Brenda, on the other hand, were left to deal with the consequences of their actions. They no longer had the luxury of playing the roles they had so carefully crafted for themselves. The house they had taken from me, the money they had stolen, they would have to find their own way now. They had no idea what it felt like to be truly vulnerable, to be at the mercy of someone else's decisions. But now they would learn. And as I stood at the head of the new facility, looking out at the people who had found a new home, I knew that this wasn't just my victory. It was theirs too. It was the victory of every person who had ever been pushed aside, discarded, and left behind. And I wasn't done yet. I've learned a lot these past few years, I said quietly to myself as I stood in the quiet of my new life. I've learned that no one can take your dignity unless you let them. I looked out over the building I had bought, the future I had built from the ground up. This was more than just a building, it was a symbol of my triumph, of how I had taken back what was mine. And I knew that now, at the end of this journey, I had finally become the woman I was always meant to be. Strong, independent, and in control of my own destiny. They thought they could break me. They thought they could take everything I had. But they were wrong. This was my life. And now it was mine again.